Thank goodness the mess is over. There was an emotional plea to Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa. Southern Africa Tourism Services Association Chief Executive David Frost, or otherwise known as Don Quixote in the tourism sector, so I'm told, finally got his way. After a long-winded visa regulation battle, South African government finally relenting and making a U-turn on elements of the contentious visa regulations. But just how much damage has been done, and have the new conditions gone far enough to redress the madness that has characterized the last 6 months? This is the Moneymakers. I'm Bruce Whitfield, and to answer some of these questions, I am joined by Graeme Stephens, who's Chief Executive of Sun International, and David Frost, who is Chief Executive of the Southern Africa Tourism Services Association, or SATSA. Let's start with you, David. I mean, what an extraordinary 6 months the tourism industry.
Well, it's actually been 16 months, Bruce.
Well, the worst 6 months now, but I suppose the build-up to it, and then the 6 months of the visa regulations, and then probably another 18 months to try and unwind the mess that's been created.
Yeah, look, I mean, let's just say we're incredibly grateful for the accommodation that's been struck. It's very much what we asked for in the first instance. We were suggesting when we looked at this that we were not blind at all to the issues of state security, but that what we needed to do was balance that with tourism growth. And to that end, we were suggesting biometrics on arrival, which they've moved to. And we strongly opposed the birth certificate issue because it's totally out of kilter with the rest of the world, the only country that introduced this. And there's no sort of proof that it actually has a sort of combating effect on the 23 cases of child trafficking, which was the quantum of the problem.
Home Affairs, right from the very start, was using figures like 30,000, then rubbished by Africa Check. Good for them for doing it. Complete and utter rubbish. That I'm tempted to use rude words. I get so cross about this stuff. But Home Affairs went down a path that has been turned around. The Interministerial Committee, which didn't consult the tourism industry at all in the process, has backed down. Now, does it take us back to where we were, or are there still regulations in place which could prove problematic?
Well, I think it sort of, in essence, takes us back to where we were. We are still going to need biometric data to be captured, but that is going to be phased in at ports of arrival, beginning with OR Tambo, which is really good news. People still need visas, as they did in China, but now we're going to use accredited travel agents to perform that function. So that's hopefully going to expedite the process. Those will be done, be sort of captured and done through post, which is in essence what was happening to an extent before these regulations. Very importantly, countries where we didn't have a consular presence, under the regulations, if you lived in Bogota in Colombia, you would have had to undertake an international trip to Lima in Peru, or Caracas in Venezuela, or Washington D.C. I mean, you pick a consulate. You would have had to fly internationally to go and get a visa, and obviously not many people were going to do that. So that's been done away with. That can be done by post. So that's a good story. The unabridged birth certificates are done away with for international visa exempt countries, which is great. Unfortunately, they're still in place for South Africans travelling. But my remit is the inbound side.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, we're incredibly happy and quite grateful.
Okay, so on that point, quite grateful eventually. Graeme Stephens, I saw numbers suggesting that you've lost 90% of the Chinese tourists, and anybody who'd been to Sun City at any point in the last 5 years. The one thing that was pretty obvious was lots of Chinese people really like Sun City. Maybe it was the saving grace for Sun City. But you've lost something like 90% of your tourists in the last year or so.
We've lost a lot. China being one market we lost, but also India, South America, Russia down significantly. So with the change back to a degree of normality, we're hoping to get some business back now.
No, I mean, you many years ago, you had tourism offices around the world. You actually had a European head office. I think you had one near Windsor or something like that, yes. Or thereabouts. There was an office there. You had a big infrastructure. Over the years, you've cut back on that infrastructure. How are you then going to now get the message out that Sun International in South Africa is open for business again? Guys, please come back.
No, well, look, as we talk, our rep for South Asia is on a plane. Literally, we got the news yesterday. She's going across there right now. And it'll take some time. We think it's probably 6 months to turn the taps back on, but she's literally going to land there tomorrow and start that process through our affiliates, through the wholesale market. Getting back into brochures, they'd literally stop selling us as a destination. So
But there's a lag in tourism, isn't there? I mean, so yes, this week the announcement has happened that we're open for business once again. But anybody who's booked a holiday anywhere in the world for the holidays for this December-January period, they've booked. They're already going to Australia, or they're going to Latin America, or they're going somewhere in the south of Europe to see the worst part of the northern hemisphere winter out.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. So it's 6 months minimum, we think, maybe up to 9 months. People book a long way out. If the trade starts selling us again, then people planning their holidays for 2016 hopefully put us back on the agenda, and we can see a recovery second half of next year.
How much of these visa regulations cost you as an international?
I can't put a number to that. Fortunately, a lot of our business is still domestically reliant, domestic casinos, domestic hospitality. So in our lives, it hasn't been a life changer, but certainly for the industry, it has been a disaster. The smaller operators in particular. So we've made our voice heard on behalf of the industry. I think the smaller guys must be breathing a huge sigh of relief.
Yeah, it's going to take some time though to come back. Grant Thornton, which published the original research into this, which was used by the industry to go to government and say, guys, here are the numbers. Government went, yeah, whatever, and chucked the reports out the window. They're estimating this could have cost the country, by the time it's all fixed, 16 billion rand in real cost and opportunity cost.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, those numbers, I mean, when we commissioned that, it was the Tourism Business Council that commissioned Grant Thornton to do the study. When we started getting the real data, and it's been amazing in this process that we've unearthed data sources we never knew existed, but post-June we were able to track through the Airlines Association of Southern Africa the number of children under 18 travelling.
And that was indisputable, because the Airlines Association knows who is coming on its member flights.
Absolute fact. June, July, August, that number dropped 44% out of South Africa into South Africa. So one can extrapolate from there, and very conservatively saying one adult for one child. You know, often it could be two adults for one child. But one adult for one child, that was a loss of 138,000 pax annualized. And if you extrapolate that to land borders, it goes up to over 500,000 lost tourism. I mean lost tourists. So I think the key thing is that the sooner we stop this, and thank goodness for the announcement. Now there's a bit of a sort of a lull period while the bureaucrats sort out the amendments to the regulations, bearing in mind that these are law and they do need to be amended. But as soon as we get the green light, as Graeme quite directly says, we've got to get out and start selling. I think we need a major PR effort, that we open for business. South Africa, with its product, is so well suited to multi-generational travel, to accommodating families, and that's precisely what we've got to go back and claw back.
And one of the great crimes, I suppose, of this process in the last 18 months is we've had currency as weak as it was the last time we saw a massive tourism boom 10, 15 years ago. At 20 to the pound, this is a very attractive tourism destination, doubly attractive tourism destination, Graeme.
No, absolutely. And in fact, through all of this, the UK market has remained pretty strong. Direct flight, strong currency, well-established understanding of South Africa. So we haven't suffered as much from those markets. It's the emerging markets just discovering us. It's become a little harder to get here. Actually, we've lost a few direct flights, and the currency's weaker.
SAA cancelled flights. I mean, that was an SAA survival mechanism, and then we've done our deal with Air China to get direct flights to Beijing. But have there been other airline casualties in this process?
There are a couple direct flights lost to Southeast Asia. The hub is now through Abu Dhabi or Dubai. Okay. And so there's a two-flight way of getting here. Hong Kong, you can still fly directly.
But certainly we've shot ourselves in the foot with respect to tourism, and global tourism anyway.
No, absolutely no doubt. And as I said, particularly the emerging markets who are just discovering us, it's easy for them to go and discover someone else. Our traditional markets at least understand us. We're hoping they'll bounce back a lot quicker.
You've been really calm and magnanimous about this, David, but I mean, there must have been deep-felt fury within the tourism industry, where that government just wasn't prepared to listen. There was absolutely zero interest in hearing the side of business in this.
Yeah, look, I don't think it's been a period that we'll look back with any sort of sense of joy on. But I think we've learnt important lessons, and I'm just grateful that the Interministerial Committee has been able to deliberate sort of in a sober fashion. We were confident that when the data was put on the table, and we generated copious amounts of data speaking to the impacts of this, that when somebody looks at this with a sober and a sort of clean mind, that they would find in fact the way they have. So from that point of view, I think the main thing is to look forward now. You know, when we look at Australia as the great sort of long haul tourism success story of the last 30 years, and you see the way they do it. They start with what they want, which is tourism growth. Then they say which agencies are involved. Their home affairs is a thing to play. Well, what countries are we targeting? Can we make it easier? And they go about it. We ended up starting with what we don't want, which is child trafficking and state security and terrorists, and then we just excluded everybody else from the debate. So I think these are the lessons we need to learn, is that we need to work together. That I think there have been some important columns written in the last couple of weeks around issues of inequality and growth. If we want growth, business is the way to actually generate the economic value that helps us deal with growth and hence deal with poverty.
One of the best things that came out of the medium-term budget policy statement was not the 10% extra cost for civil servants. It wasn't the extra budget for VIP protection services. It was a line that has been massively underreported, Graeme, and that was something to the effect that in future every law and policy decision needs to go through a cost-benefit analysis. And to my mind, it was a direct go at Home Affairs for this particular action, because we're constantly creating policy that is prohibitive to the growth.
Yeah,
that we talk about.
I think if there are lessons that have been learned, hopefully, is to better coordinate government's intentions and actions going forward. I mean, clearly the intention wasn't bad, but it was in isolation. And had there been better interaction with the tourism sector and industry, government in the end managed to coordinate a sane response. Yeah. But hopefully, a lesson learned going forward, let's coordinate it.
But David talks about a national imperative where the Australians work together. The Australian government is saying, how do we grow Australia? How do we improve Australia? It's all about the betterment of Australia. In South Africa, we've got this weird chasm between big business on one side and government on the other, and they sit on the either side of this chasm and spit at each other.
And I think within government, as well intentioned as individual departments might be, I don't think they coordinate their efforts either. So you find yourself as business dealing with different divisions. It would be much easier if it was coordinated, and hopefully one lesson learned out of this process.
Well, hopefully we take the lesson and actually learn it, because we can't keep learning lessons, David Frost. I mean, lessons are blimmin' expensive. We talk about paying school fees. You know, hopefully at the end of 12 years, you stop paying school fees, and then you get free university after that. But we pay far too many school fees.
Yeah.
Do you get a sense that the lessons are lessons learned, that we lessons applied?
Well, look, I mean, it's been a couple of days, but I'm confident that we can take this forward. I mean, the tourism industry is an interesting one, because it's one of these sectors that nobody gets it right on their own. We need a strong government through SA Tourism and provincial tourism agencies. We need the private sector, and then we need the national carrier, and we need all of them to be on the same page. And that's what the Aussies have got right. We still haven't quite got it right, even within tourism, but we've got the monkey off our back. And I think now, if we can actually start synergizing the efforts and harnessing public and private sector efforts within this, we can actually claw back. And instead of being at sort of -10, -20, -30, those should be plus signs. We should be growing with the exchange rate that we've got in double digits in most of our markets.
Thank you to Graeme Stephens, Chief Executive of Sun International, and to David Frost, who's Chief Executive of the Southern Africa Tourism Services Association. More Moneymakers next time on the show. Thanks for watching. Good night.